Hello, and welcome to my obsession with Middle Earth. So, The Rings of Power is a show on Amazon Prime that is going to be coming out very soon, and it is based on the works of one J.R.R. Tolkien. So, Tolkien mythology is like a lot. And I get that. Like, the Silmarillion, this thing right here, which I keep turning, I'll get to the cover eventually. This is just like names, dates, and places. It's worse than an 8th grade civics book, and that's saying a lot. Although I do think this is more interesting. Like, I think at this point, I know more about Middle Earth's history than Earth history. I'm not proud of that. So the reason I think so many people are really terrible at explaining Tolkien to people who haven't read it or maybe just know the movies is that, like, we all have a finite amount of time on this planet. And Tolkien nerds have spent so much of that time reading all these fucking damn books. So when we get a chance to talk Tolkien, we're gonna throw a lot at you because that's all we have to brag about in our lives because we've done nothing else with them. So forgive us. And I'm definitely far from being a Tolkien nerd like Stephen Colbert. I don't even know what he's talking about half the time. I'm still learning. And someone who is still learning, I think I'm the perfect person to kind of be able to explain some stuff that you might find useful in going into the Rings of Power. Because I'm looking at this from a point of view of, this is like for people who've just seen like the Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson trilogy, didn't even watch the Hobbit movies, right? I think I could explain to you what the Rings of Power is about because I like this thing called lay terms. I'm not going to bog you down with useless detail. That's a lie. I am definitely going to bog you down with useless details, but I'm going to do it in a fun way because I've had a lot of coffee. And to be honest, I made this way too strong, and I think you can hear in my voice I'm kind of crying a little. I just took a sip, and that's what's going on right now. Okay, so yes, The Rings of Power is a trilogy that's coming, but I also want to note that the show only was allowed to use these 3 books and The Hobbit, which I left downstairs. But most importantly, from these 3 books, they are using the appendices, which is found in Return of the King, which in my copy is like this. So like this portion is probably the most important information they got to use, although I do think that the Tolkien estate did give them permission to use a lot of information from other points in these books and from Tolkien's other writings if they just asked, which I'm sure they did. Okay, so I made a 50-slide PowerPoint. Let's get into it. The Rings of Power will take place in what is known as the Second Age. But like, what is the Second Age? Good question. So in Tolkien's myth, there are 2 great periods of time that occur after the creation of the universe and the world. Side note, I may or may not be pronouncing any of these names correctly, so winging it. The Valian years and the years of the sun. The Valian years are broken up into the years of the lamps, followed by the years of the trees. And both of these periods occurred before the world had yet to see its first sunrise. After the first sunrise, when the sun was set into the sky, we get our second period of time, the years of the sun, which is broken up into 4 parts, pretty easily named: First Age, Second Age, Third Age, and Fourth Age. The years of the lamps through the First Age is when the Wicked One, Morgoth, also known as Melkor, was wreaking havoc. And this is an important backstory for Sauron, who rose to power during the Second Age, and we see him defeated in the Third Age during the events of the Lord of the Rings. So I have it kind of broken up. The beginning or the creation of like the universe and the world takes place over a span of about 1900 years. And if you know Tolkien myth, the world and everything is created via a song called the Ainulindale. Then you have the Years of the Lamps, which is like 1600 years. The Years of the Trees, which is about 1500 years. And the First Age, which is about 587 years. And like I said, during these 3 periods of time is when Melkor is on the rise and being super evil. And I'll explain who and what Melkor is and who and what Sauron is, because I feel like a lot of people don't really know. So the Second Age, which is about 3,441 years, I don't know why I said about and then a specific number, but that's what happened. This is when Sauron's rising to power. This is when Numenor is very important. I'll explain what that is later. And this is when the Rings of Power sets place. Okay, then we get the Third Age, which is about 3,021 years. This is when Sauron is still evil, but he is finally defeated. And this is when we see The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings take place. And then I wrote the Fourth Age, which takes, well, it begins basically after Frodo has left Arda for the Land of the West, which is at the very, very end. It's the final ending of the many endings of The Return of the King. And then below that, I wrote Dagarath, which is basically Tolkien decided the whole Middle Earth, everything would end in basically this Ragnarok-esque battle, which he named Dagarath, which that part is not really important. I just thought that was a fun fact. Okay, moving on. So these are some Tolkien races that are kind of important, and I didn't explain this well, and I didn't make a good graph. So stick with me. We have an all-powerful supreme deity called Eru Iluvatar, which is basically like God. And he created the universe and the world, as well as some lesser gods, which are called they're called the Aenir. And then there are 2 types, the Valar and the Maiar. The Valar are broken up into 2 subgroups. So we have the Holy Ones, which there's 8 of those, and then we have just the normal ones. But they're all Valar, even though I wrote them into 2 groups. So we have some important ones. Melkor is the most powerful, and he's our big bad throughout the earlier parts of time. His brother, Manwe, who is like the second most powerful. Varda is kind of important. Ivana is kind of important. Ole is kind of important. And Nina. Those I think are the only Valar I'm really going to mention. But here's all of their names in case you're curious. Then we have the Maiar, who are like the lesser gods, or like you could think of them as angels. They're like these celestial beings, and some of them have come to Earth. We don't know how many there are. The Valar, there's specifically like the 16, and that's it. With the Maiar, we don't know how many there are, and only some of them have been named. Probably the one most people know is going to be Gandalf. Secondly, Sauron is one of these. Saruman is one of these. Radagast is also, and there's a few I listed who you probably don't know, but I'm going to be talking about. Tilion and Aaron are very important as it pertains to the moon and the sun, and I'll tell their story later. And then Alatar and Palamendo are known as the Blue Wizards. So 5 of these Maiar come to Earth in the Third Age. Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, Alatar, and Palamendo. They all come to Earth and take on like mortal forms during the Third Age, and Tolkien would call them Ishtari, but I'm just going to call them super wizards. And then obviously Sauron has also come to Middle Earth, although he did so before the Third Age. He was here, I'm actually not 100% certain, but he was definitely wreaking havoc during the First Age on Middle Earth. Okay, moving on. So I thought a good place to start personally would be where we've already been, which is the Lord of the Rings. And specifically, I'm going to quote the like 10-minute prologue Galadriel says at the beginning of Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring. And while, as I said, the events of Lord of the Rings takes place in the Third Age, what led up to that, that's explained in the prologue, that's like almost all Second Age shit. So the series, The Rings of Power, will essentially be a prequel to The Lord of the Rings. Like, you should be able to see a lot of things that bleed over. All right. So I'm going to read this, and I am so sorry, but here we go. I don't use a ring light. The world is changed. I feel it in the water, I feel it in the earth, I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it. It began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest, and fairest of all beings. 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of men who above all else desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and will to govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. In the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord Sauron forged in secret a master ring to control all others. And into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One ring to rule them all. Ajnag Derbak Tuluk. One by one the free lands of Middle-earth fell to the power of the ring. But there were some who resisted. A last alliance of elves and men marched against the armies of Mordor, and on the slopes of Mount Doom they fought for freedom of Middle-earth. Victory was near, but the power of the ring could not be undone. And it was in this moment, when all hope had faded, that Isildur, son of the king, took up his father's sword. Sauron, the enemy of the free people of Middle-earth, was defeated. The ring passed to Isildur, who had this one chance to destroy evil forever. But the hearts of men are easily corrupted, and the ring has a will of its own. It betrayed Isildur to his death, and some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend, legend became myth, and for 2,500 years the ring passed out of knowledge, until, when chance came, it ensnared a new bearer. The ring came to the creature Gollum, who took it deep into the tunnels of the misty mountains, and there it consumed him. The ring brought to Gollum a natural long life. For 500 years it poisoned his mind, and in the gloom of Gollum's cave it waited. Darkness crept back into the forests of the world. Rumor grew of a shadow in the east, whispers of a nameless fear, and the Ring of Power perceived its time had now come. It abandoned Gollum. But something happened then the ring did not intend. It was picked up by the most unlikely creature imaginable, a hobbit, Bilbo Baggins of the Shire. For the time will soon come when hobbits will shape the fortunes of all. And thus beginneth the Lord of the Rings, which the War of the Rings is what ends the Third Age. Okie dokie then. So a lot to unpack there. I'm also going to throw up the poem, 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. And just to show off, I can do the end part in Black speech, aka the language of Mordor, which is Ajnag Derbak Tul, Ajnag Grimbak Tul, Ajnag Thrak Tulak, Aj Brzumi Shi Krimbak Tul. Doesn't it sound better? And you can hear that in the Hobbit movies. Benedict Cumberbatch plays a necromancer in those films, which is one of the disguises of Sauron, who, by the way, is a shapeshifter. Fun stuff. I'm going off the slides. I made all these slides, and I'm just going off them. Why do I do that? Okay, so we have the rings. Here's how they break down. There's 20 rings in all. We have the 1 ring to rule them all, which Sauron wears, and it was forged by Sauron alone in Mount Doom secretly. Then we have the 16 lesser rings, 7 of which were given to the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, and they were forged. Okay, so I wrote Celebrimbor and Sauron, but they're actually just forged by the elves of a land called Erisian. I'll get more into that later. So the Erisian elves and Sauron forged those together. 9 for the mortal men doomed to die. They become the ring wraiths, or the Nazgul, and they were also forged by the elves of Erisian and Sauron together. And then you have the 3 for the elven kings under the sky, who were forged by Celebrimbor all on his own. Celebrimbor is the ruler of Erisian. And those 3 elven rings are the only 3 rings that are named. They are Vila, Neria, and Ninya, and they were given to these elves here. 2 were given to Gil-galad, and 1 was given to Galadriel. I'll explain who Gil-galad is momentarily. Gil-galad then gave one of his rings to Elrond, and then he gave the other ring to Círdan. I'll explain who he is. And then Círdan in the Third Age would later give his ring to Gandalf. So throughout the Lord of the Rings, Gandalf actually is himself a ring bearer, as is Galadriel and Elrond. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to get into the forging of the rings, which is going to be a huge part of what the Rings of Power is about, as you might have been able to tell. So the Rings of Power are created by Sauron with the aid of the Elves of Eregion, and Eregion again is ruled by Celebrimbor. So Celebrimbor is one of the last elves in the house of Fëanor, making him the, believe the great-grandson of Finwe, or maybe he's just the grandson. I actually made this whole thing. So he's the, yes, great-grandson of Finwe. He's the grandson of Fëanor. This is important, and I'll explain who Fëanor is. Very, very important later on. So he was born during the Years of the Trees. So by the Second Age, he's in his thousands. He is very old. And he has seen so much shit. Like, so much stuff. So much destruction. So many battles and wars. Poor guy. Okay, so during the Second Age, Celebrimbor lived in Eregion, which is a settlement of Nordarian elves. There are multiple types of elves, so that's just one kind. They live near the dwarf home called Khazad-dûm, which you also might know as Moria. Celebrimbor and the elves of Eregion were close to the dwarves, which was very, very rare at the time. In the trailer, we can see one of the dwarves is holding up a material which is probably mithril, and that is what is used to make the Doors of Durin, which Celebrimbor made with one of the dwarves, which is pretty cool. So when Gandalf says, "Speak, friend, and you shall enter," like those doors that you see in the Fellowship at the Mines of Moria are called the Doors of Durin, and friend is, the word for friend in Sindarin, I'm assuming is what they speak, is Medon. Okay, moving on. Again, bragging, it's all I have. So, in the Second Age, a Maya of Aule. So if you remember, the Maya serve under the Valar. So, and one of the Valar is Ole. I'm saying his name wrong. Ole. So one of his basically servants or apprentices, Anatar, arrives in Eregion, and with the help of the elves there, they crafted the 16 lesser rings. Celebrimbor did not trust Anatar, and he was very right in his distrust, because Anatar is actually the disguise of a shapeshifter, the super wizard, Sauron, the evil one. So Celebrimbor forged the 3 elven rings alone. However, he did craft them in the way that Sauron had taught the elves, and thus he kind of unintentionally imbued the elven rings with Sauron's magic, which is why the 3 elven rings are still beholden somewhat to the One Ring. Okay, so as I said earlier, Sauron did craft the One Ring in secret in Mount Doom on his own, and we do know that that is the only place the One Ring can be destroyed. So, like, what are the ring's powers? And honestly, I'm kind of vague on this, but they do seem to affect different races differently. So the 9 mortal men got like wealth, power, and they became sorcerers and had very long lives, but they also became enslaved to Sauron, and they were the most easy to bend to his will because, you know, men be weak. But they were kings, and these 9 kings became the ring wraiths, or the Nazgul. I only know 2 of the names, which is the Witch King, Angmar, and his second in command, Khamûl, or the Black Easterling. Okay, then we have the 7 for the Dwarf Lords, and they used their rings to get gold, but the gold that they got attracted dragons, And the dwarfs did seem immune to much of the ring's negative effects, and Sauron was not able to bend them to his will. And I think they might have been immune because they were actually not created by Eru Ilúvatar, or God. They were created instead by the Vala Ole. He's been mentioned a lot. But there are 7 dwarf clans, so I'm assuming, because we actually don't know a lot about the dwarves, that the rings were given to these 7 dwarves. So one for Durin's folk, and this is the only one that we have a lot of information on, and you see them in the trailer. Firebeards, Broadbeams, Iron Fists, Stiffbeards, Blacklocks, and Stonefoots. I don't know why I counted 8 when there's 7. I don't know how to count. That's my life. Moving on. And then 3 to the Elven Kings. And they recognized, as soon as Sauron put on his one ring, they recognized his evil immediately. So they are not like men. They are not, they did not become enslaved to him. So we have Narya, which is fire. And this ring has the power to inspire others to resist tyranny, domination, and despair. I'm just quoting the wiki here. Nenya, water, has the power of preservation, protection, and concealment from evil. And then Bila, air, is the most powerful, but also the most vague as to what it can do. This is the one Elrond wears. We don't really know exactly what it does. It might be able to heal and preserve. It could give him concealment too, or maybe control some elements. I'm not really sure. Backstory on Sauron. Who Sauron? What Sauron? Why Sauron? Good questions all. Sauron has many names. Originally, he was named Mehran. He's also gone by Anatar, Olendil, and Gothar. So he is a Maya who came into existence before the Ainulindale and created by Eru Ilúvatar. So he was created by God, like all the other Maya were. And he served the Vala Ole. He was a craftsman who taught him blacksmithery and metalwork, so that's why Sauron making these rings actually makes a lot of sense, because that's his whole fucking deal. So I'm quoting, Mehran was as Eru created him, good and uncorrupted. His greatest virtue was his love of order and perfection, and dislike of anything wasteful. However, this would also prove to be the cause of his downfall, as Mehran saw in Melkor the will and power that would help him achieve his personal end than if he pursued them alone. So he's basically a perfectionist who just wanted order in this kind of chaotic and wasteful world. That's his whole thing. That's it. That's Sauron's evil goal. His mastermind. Okay. But also, an interesting note is that there was another Maya who served under Ole Kurumo, also known as Saruman. Everyone under Ole went evil, except for the dwarves. He sucks. Moving on. So I thought I would tell a little backstory, and I'm literally telling a story here. Again, I'm gonna get wild, y'all. I'm so sorry. Okay, you ready? I'm ready. Totally ready. All right. There was once a time the world was still so young it had yet to see a sunrise. The great Anu, Ivana, came to her husband Ole, the craftsman, and pleaded with him to make something to bring light to the world of Arda. He crafted 2 great lamps. Varda, who had once placed all the stars in the sky, filled these 2 lamps with light. The eldest and most powerful of the Ainur, Manwe, hung the lamp Iluin on the pillar in the north of Arda, and Ormo on a pillar in the south of Arda. There these lamps illuminated all of the world. Morgoth, bitter and angry, destroyed the lamps his siblings created and sent all of the Ainur fleeing from Middle-earth, where they lived in Elmarin, to the continent, Amen, Valinor, where they established a new home in a city they named Valmar. There, in Valmar, Ivana sang 2 trees into life, watered by the tears of Nina. There these 2 trees began to glow, one golden and bearing fruit, Laurelin, the other silver and blooming flowers, Telperion. Together these 2 trees bathed all of Arda in light. Once again, Morgoth grew upset, and with the aid of a giant spider, the mother of Shelob, they snuck into Valmar and destroyed the trees. Morgoth sucking the light up for himself, plunging Valinor and all of Arda into darkness. Ivana and Nina were able to gain one last fruit from Lorelin and one last flower from Telperion. Ole created grand vessels to sail into the sky. Each vessel was flown by a Maya. Tilion took Telperion's final flower and became the moon. The second most powerful Maya, Eren, took Laurelin's last fruit and became the sun. Thus the years of the trees faded into the first age of the years of the sun. Alright. Cool. So I think you got a decent idea of what happened there. And I can go further on the backstory of Sauron's seduction by Morgoth, aka Melkor. I'm calling him Melkor from now on. Sauron, Mehran at the time, was seduced to the dark side by Avala, Melkor, aka Morgoth. Melkor was the most powerful of the Aenar created by Eru, and he rebelled against Eru and wanted to create things of his own. And when that didn't work out, he decided to destroy and corrupt what was created by Eru and the other Aenar. He destroyed the two lamps. He tortures elves and turns them into orcs. He corrupted Maiar and turned them into Balrogs. He started the Wars of the Powers. He destroyed the two trees and stole the Silmarilli, which are jewels that were created by the elf Fëanor. We'll get more of that. Which started the War of the Jewels in the First Age. And in the end, he is defeated in the War of Wrath, which pits elves, men, and the Valar against him and his army. Arendelle, the father of Elrond and Elros, begged the Valar in Valinor to help, and they agreed. And in this great battle of Beleriand, sank, leaving only Lindon. So an entire continent sank, leaving only one little area called Lindon, which is very important to the elves in the Second Age. Melkor was collared, chained, and cast to the door of the night into the timeless void. And thus endeth the First Age of the years of the sun. Whoosh. Alright, so I've been talking about some elves. I've been naming them, and you're probably like, who the fuck are these people? Well, they're not people, they're elves. Alright, so here's them, they. These are some of them. And these are the children of, Finwe. So, Finwe married a woman, or an elf, Muriel, and had a son, Fëanor, who had 7 sons and 1 grandson. His grandson being Celebrimbor, who we talked earlier, ruled a region and helped make the rings. Very important guy. Fëanor's 7 sons are super important, and we're going to get so heavily into their backstory. His first wife, Finwe's first wife, Muriel, passed, and so he remarried Indis, and they proceeded to have 4 children. Specifically, they had 2 sons who are also very important, Fingolfin and Finarfin. So Finarfin is very important for being the father of Galadriel. For people who don't know, Galadriel does have a daughter, Celebrimbor, who is the wife of Elrond, making her the mother of Arwen. And Finarfin's grandson is Gil-galad. So that's important to know. Gil-galad and Galadriel are related to each other, and Galadriel is older than Gil-galad. Galadriel, very old, very wise. Wisest of the elves, really. Fingolfin is important because through him, he is the great-grandfather of Arendelle. Arendelle marries Elwing. Both of these 2 people are 2 of the only half-elves in existence. Alliances, like marriages between elves and man did not work out. Tolkien was very specific. There were 3. And I got them right here. So the offspring of these 3, so there's Elwing and Arendelle who marry each other. There was only one other, and that is actually the father of Elwing, who is a half-elf who married an elf. It gets kind of complicated. So the 2 half-elves had twin sons, Elrond and Elros. Very important. Obviously, Elrond, hugely important for the Lord of the Rings, and Elros is important because he is the first king of Numenor, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so the Finwe family tree. Finwe was the first High King of the Noldor. Noldor were a type of elf. The other two big ones are Vanya and Teleri. And he was likely one of the very first elves who ever awoke on Arda in the Years of the Trees. All of the elves sprang into existence in the Years of the Trees. Man didn't come to be into existence until the Years of the Sun. And his 3 sons, Fëanor, Fingolfin, and Finarfin, are very important. So let's start with, oh my gosh, Fëanor. Oh, buddy. So Fëanor was born in the Years of the Trees, and he died in the Years of the Trees. He was a craftsman who created the Silmaril, which are jewels that were created from essence, 3 jewels that were created from the essence of the 2 trees. He also created the Palantiri, which is that black stone that we see in Lord of the Rings that Sauron uses to kind of see other stuff. He married and had 7 sons. Again, his grandson is Celebrimbor, who crafted the Rings of Power. Fëanor, and Melkor did not get along, and their arguments resulted in Fëanor getting banished to a place called Formenos, which is still in Valinor. Valinor, again, is the land where the Valar live, and elves live there too. In Lord of the Rings, it's referred to as the West or the Undying Lands. So Finwe abdicates his throne to be with Fëanor in exile. During this time, Melkor steals the Silmaril, destroys the 2 trees, and then he stopped by Formenos and murders Finwe. Just for kicks. And then he crossed the Helcaraxe, which is an ice bridge that connects Valinor to Middle-earth, specifically the continent of Belerind, which, if you recall, I mentioned is destroyed at the end of the one of the Wars of Wrath. This kicks off a huge deal. So the Oath of Fëanor. Fëanor is pissed at the Valar and ignores his exile, and he goes back to talk to the elves, and he riles them all up, and he gets his 7 sons to vow to get the Silmaril back at all costs. And this leads to a lot of harm and tragedy and devastation and 3 kinslayings. Kinslayings would be elf on elf violence. Yikes. So with his second wife, Finwe has Fingolfin and Finarfin. Fingolfin is the oldest of the 2. He was born in the Years of the Trees, and he died at the end of the First Age. He led many of the Nordal elves across the Helcaraxe to Middle-earth after Melkor, after he destroyed the trees and stole the Silmaril and killed his father, which you can understand why he would be angry. He's not close to his brother Fëanor, but, his dad did get killed, so, he is killed by Melkor, super killed, Melkor was making an example out of him. And through his son Turgon, he's the grandfather of Idril, and she is one of the elves who married a human man, Tor, and through them they have a half-elf son, Arundel, who's the father of Elrond and Elros. Then the youngest child Finwe has is Finarfin, who was born in the Years of Trees, and as far as we don't know when he died at all. I'll get into why. He was going to go with his brothers after Melkor, but then turned back and was pardoned by the Valar. And he became the ruler of the Noldor elves in the city of Tirion in Valinor. And he did end up joining the War of Wrath in the First Age, but then he returned back to Valinor. Galadriel is his daughter, and she doesn't like him. She's the only person she doesn't like. It's a whole big thing. And through his son Angrod, he's the great-great-grandfather of Gil-galad, who's important for being the ruler of Lindon and being one of the leaders of the last alliance of elves and men, which we'll get more into. Okay, so let's talk about all these elves, bro. So many elves. I've been mentioning all these elves. Here's some of the important elves. This is them. This is they. I'll explain who they are in more detail now. Galadriel. She was born in the Years of the Tree at 1362 in Valinor to Finarfin, son of Finwe, and Erwin, daughter of Olwe, the king of the Teleri. So she comes from royalty, yo. And she was close to her brother Finrod and did not like her father, Finarfin. She married Celebrimbor, she married Celeborn. a lot of these people have very similar names. And who was the grandson of Elmo, brother to Olwe, so she married her cousin. Yeah. And they have a daughter, Celebrain, in the Second Age. And as I mentioned before, Celebrain does marry Elrond, and they have 3 kids. Most notably would be Arwen. It was the beginning of the Second Age. Galadriel and Celeborn were living in Lindon. Then they moved to Eregion after Celebrain is born sometime, and eventually they migrate to Lothlorien, where they do end up becoming the rulers of Lothlorien. Like, she's been through a lot of wars. Really, she wanted to explore, and she left Valinor to do that. However, she got caught up when the other elves were leaving and ends up being banished. So sometimes her time at Lothlorien is known as the Lament of Lothlorien. We are going to see a little bit of Finrod, it looks like, in the Rings of Power, so a little about him. He's killed during the First Age, towards the end of it, at Tolin Garhoth, which is the island of werewolves. And he's either killed by werewolves or Sauron, but he was in a battle previous to that and was saved by a man named Barahir. And so he promised to protect Barahir and his kin. Barahir has a son, Beren. Very, very famous and important dude. There's a whole book about him, Beren and Luthien, and they are trying to steal the Silmarillion back. They do get it. Well, actually his father had it. It's a whole deal. But anyway, they're fighting Sauron, and Finrod is helping, and they get captured by werewolves because, by BT dubs, Tolin Garhoth is where the shape-shifting super wizard Sauron lived as a werewolf. We have an Isle of Werewolves, and we've never seen it on film. What a waste. I want that more than anything. So yeah, so he protects them, and he dies in doing so, and it's tragic. Moving on. Gil-galad, the last High King of the Noldor on Middle-earth. He was the great-grandson of Finwe. He was born in Valinor during the Years of the Trees in 1481, and he dies during the Second Age in 3441 during the Siege of Barad-dûr, which is important, and I'll get to that later. He's killed by Sauron. He presides over Lindon, the last land that survived the destruction of the continent Beleriand during the War of the Raft at the ending of the First Age. Elrond is his second in command, and they met at the end of the First Age when Elrond was very, very young. After Elrond chose to be of elf kind. It's a whole thing, and I'll get to that. He saw through Anatar's deception early on when Sauron, came to Lindon and sent Elrond to try to warn others. He received 2 of the Rings of Power. He gave one to Elrond and one to Círdan, who lives in a port city in Lindon called the Grey Heavens, and he is a very old and wise and powerful elf who's very cool. Gil-galad and Elendil, the Lord of the Andúni and the first king of Gondor and Arnor, worked together during the last alliance of elves and men at the end of the Second Age, and they are both killed by Sauron during the Siege of Barad-dûr, which is very important, and we do see that as the prologue for Fellowship. Alright, lastly, Elrond. Elrond and his twin brother, Elros, are born to 2 half-elves, Arundel and Elwing. Elwing ends up abandoning her twin sons when they were very, very young during one of the Fëanor sons' kinslayings. And she dives into the sea, and the Valar Omo turns her into a giant bird, so she's able to fly to her husband's ship, and they actually land in Valinor. And they, while being half-elves, both, are still part man. But they're given a pardon by the Valar for being slightly mortals who set foot in Valinor, which mortals are not allowed to do. And they're given a gift to be able to choose if they want to be like elves or like man. And they both choose to be like elves. And then also, they both plead to them to go and fight Melkor because he's wrecking shit. So the Valar leave Valinor to go to Middle-earth and destroy Melkor, and that's when Beleriand sinks into, well, it doesn't sink. Well, it does. Beleriand gets destroyed through all of these gods battling on it. God's gonna wreck shit, I guess. Arendelle, fate is then to, they make Elendil take the Silmarilli he has and sail his ship into the sky to protect the moon and the sun. So Elendil is literally, during the Second Age and Third Age, in the sky, sailing with the Silmarilli, protecting the moon and the sun, just in case. So if Elrond ever misses his father, he can literally look up into the sky and see him sailing his ship. It's a very strange bit of information. So anyway, Elrond and Elros are born at the end of the First Age in 532 in Beleriand. They're basically abducted by one of Feanor's sons, Maglor, after he and Medros committed the third kinslaying, because both of them kind of regret these other two twins died during the second kinslaying, and they felt kind of bad about that, because they're also, like, you know, murdering fellow elves, so, like, maybe they should feel bad. But they did, the twins, Elrond and Elros, did grow to love Melkor, who in turn looked at them as his own children. Eventually they do leave to go to Lindon by the very end of the First Age, when they were still quite young. And the Valar also allow them to choose what fate they want. Elros chose to be like man, and Elrond chose to be like elves. Elros leaves to become the king of Numenor, which is a continent that was risen from the sea by the Valar, kind of for him and people who will become known as the Numenorians, who were originally called the Dundane, and those are the men who fought alongside the elves to defeat Melkor, even though they didn't really do that much, but they tried, and that's what counts. Elrond marries Galadriel's daughter, Celebrane, and they have 3 children, again, notably one of which is Arwen. He is given a ring by Gil-galad, and he does fight many battles throughout the Second Age, most notably being the Siege of Barad-dûr, which is where he tells Isildur to, Isildur, destroy the ring! And Isildur's like, no. And then towards like the middle of the Second Age, he does found Rivendell, which is where we see him during the Lord of the Rings. Right, okay. Elves, 4 important ones. Moving on, I should probably talk about the line of the half-elves. I don't know if this is important or not, but I think it's cool. So, here I did pink are elves, blue are men, purple are the half-elves, and then green, Melon, she's one of the Maiar. So she's basically like Gandalf, and she was the only one who ever had a child. So we can see Idril married Tor and had Arendelle, and that's the woman who, that's the man who is sailing the ship in the sky. Thingol, the elf, married a Maya, and they had Luthien. Again, Beren and Luthien were important because they had one of the Silmarilli, and they also fought in a lot of the wars and just were pretty interesting and cool. So they had a half-elf, Beren and Luthien had a half-elf Dor, although technically wouldn't he be like 1/4 elf, 1/4 Maya, 1/2 man, but whatever. He did marry an elf, Nimloth, so they had a half-elf, kind of, that math's not exactly right, Elwing, who lives in Valinor. And then they had the twins Elros and Elrond, and so on and so forth. Okay, moving on. Don't know if that was important, but again, found it interesting. Alright, I'm on slide 27 out of 50. Jesus. So, what is Numenor? Numenor is a landmass for humans who have a very long lifespan, and was created as a gift basically for Elros and for the Dundane, who would then be called the Numenorians. Elros is the first king of the Numenorians, and they set up a city, Armenelos? I didn't pronounce that right. We'll move on. Anyway, basically when they got this area, they had to make one promise, and that is they were never allowed to sail any further west. So basically they're not allowed to go to Valinor. They're banned from that. And they basically agreed. But as the years go by, they do become more power hungry and start to resent the Valar in Valinor. and they kind of split off into two groups. So there's the ones under the kings that are like the bad ones, and then the ones who are called the faithful. They live in Andundi, and the division between these two groups increases more and more over time. The Andundi are led by an offshoot from the royal family that split off after the fourth king, because the fifth king was one of the sons, but the daughter was older, and she got pissed that she couldn't take the throne, so she left and started her own thing. And the Andundi are, one of the most important ones is Elendil, and he would end up becoming the first High King of Gondor and Arnor, which Arnor isn't really mentioned in the films Lord of the Rings, but Gondor is actually like two different places, Gondor and Arnor. So that's a whole thing. But anyway, yes. One of his descendants later on would be very famously, that we see in here, Aragorn. I could not pull his name. All right. So here's kind of like the line of the kings of Numenor. We have Elros, his son, Vladimir, Amendil, and then with the fourth king, Elendil, Tar Elendil. His son becomes the fifth king, and his daughter leaves to start the line of the Anduni lords. Then we have the fifth king, so on and so forth. Everything goes great till we get to the 20th king, who takes the title of Ar instead of Tar. And that might not seem like a big deal, but it is, because Tar is basically saying they're being faithful to the elves, whereas Ar is basically like, fuck you elves. So that's when, at this point, things are becoming tense. Okay, we get to the 23rd king, Gimorzor. He has two sons. All right. That's fine. The 24th king, Tar Palantir, has a daughter, Tar Miriel. When Palantir dies, his nephew, Therazon, marries Muriel and takes over Numenor to become the 25th king. He basically usurped power. Muriel does not like him. So we do see them in the trailer. That's these two. So she should have been in power, but didn't get it because sexism. All right. And Therazon, he's shit. He ain't shit. We don't like him. All right, so then we get to the line of the Lords of Anduni. The Anduni are a group of people. Carrying on here, you can see it's in the pink circle, Endustar, and they live in Anduni. And here's where the kings of Numenor live, in Armenelos. So anyway, you can see they're the ones who are still elf friend. They're still the faithful. So we have the first one. This is the son of the daughter of, oh my god, the fourth king. And then he's the first lord of the Anduni, the son of Cimmerian. And then we don't know much about the 2nd through the 14th. We know the 15th is this guy, not really important. We know the 17th is this guy. The 18th is that guy. We may or may not see him until in the Rings of Power, but we definitely will see Elendil. The king, or not the king, the lord of the Anduni, Elendil, is the 19th and last lord of the Anduni, and who becomes the first king of Gondor and Arnor, and he's the father of Isildur. Isildur does have a brother, who's really not mentioned a lot, but whatever. And he does become a very good friend to Gil-galad, and he is in the last alliance of elves and men. He has the sword, Narsil, which after he is killed, Isildur picks up and cuts the ring from Sauron's finger. We'll get into that later, though. Okay. So let's talk about the end of Numenor. Okay, so the last king of Numenor is the 25th king, Ar-Pharazôn. He married his cousin, who was technically the rightful ruler, Tar Miriel, to seize control. Ar-Pharazôn actually sails to Middle-earth and imprisons Sauron and brings him to Numenor. And there, Sauron is able to convince them to worship Melkor as a god, and tensions rise. Like, they literally start taking and sacrificing the Anduni, or the faithful, to Melkor. It gets crazy. And then in the second age of the year, 3,319, Ar-Pharazôn sets foot on Valinor. He's the only actual, man, not elf at all, to do this, and it is bad. The Vala ask Eru for help, and so he does a couple things. He removes Valinor from the world. He sinks Numenor into the sea, which kills a lot of Numenorians, and he makes Arda round, because before this, the world was flat. I found this picture on Wiki, which kind of explains it-ish. Kind of. I'm not great with geography, so I hope this does a good job. Yeah, so the world becomes round at the middle of the story. That's crazy. Anyway, and then the survivors go to Middle Earth, and there's basically two groups. The faithful go to Gondor and Arnor, and then the bad Numenorians, the black Numenorians, they go to a place called Umbar. I don't know if that's important or not, but now you know. All right, so the rest is just timeline stuff. Timeline. So I'm going to tell you a story. Yes, I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning and wind it back down from the creation of the world through the Second Age. Wish me luck. I wish you luck. Okay, story time. Actually, okay, story time. In the beginning, there was Eru Iluvatar. He created a host of lesser gods, the Valar. Below them he created the Maiar to aid them. Together, Eru and the Valar sang into existence the universe, and the world, Arda. The Valar made a home on Arda and continued creating as per Eru's wishes. The Vala, Varda, placed the stars into the sky, but Arda was still very dark. So at his wife's request, Ole created two great lamps to hang at the north and south ends of Arda, filled with Varda's light. But Melkor, filled with bitterness, struck down the pillars Manwë hung the great lamps on, plunging Arda back into darkness and sending the Valar from Middle-earth to the land of Valinor, and where they created the city Valmar, home. Ivana sang into life the two trees, watered by the hopeful tears of Nina, Telperion and Lorelin. These two trees then gave light to Arda for over 1,000 years from Valmar. Once again, Melkor, growing resentful and wicked, deceived the Valar, and with the spider Unglaint, they destroyed the two trees, plunging Valmar and Arda once more into darkness. Melkor's misdeeds did not stop there. He further stole the 3 Silmarili, 3 dazzling jewels the elf Fëanor, eldest son of Finwe, created from the essence of the two trees. Melkor then fled to Formanos, where Fëanor was in exile by the Valar for trying to rise against Melkor. While there, Melkor killed Finwe, High King of the Noldor Elves and father of Fëanor, Fingolfin and Finarfin. After this devastating act, Melkor made haste across the Helcaraxe to Angband, his fortress on Middle-earth. Fëanor, pained by the loss of his father, cursed Melkor and named him Morgoth, the Dark Enemy. He returned to Tirion against his exile and roused his brothers, his 7 sons, and Elfkind to go after Melkor. His 7 sons took the oath of Fëanor, which ultimately led to tragedy, destruction, and the demise of the House of Fëanor throughout the First Age. Fëanor led the first great march across the Helcaraxe, an ice bridge connecting Valinor to the continent of Beleriand. Fingolfin led the second march. The Valar banished all the elves who left Valinor. Finarfin led a third, smaller march but turned back to Valinor, and was there pardoned by the Valar. Thus Finarfin became the High King of Noldor in Tirion, in Valinor, which he still resides as today. Thus began the First Age of the Years of the Sun, and the great battle, the war of wrath between elves, men, and the Wicked One, Melkor. By this time, Melkor had already corrupted the Maya of Eol, Sauron. Many battles were fought, even between Elfkind. The sons of Fëanor sought the Silmarili from any who possessed them. This terrible vow led to 3 kinslayings. The kinslaying of Aliquandi, the second sack of Doraeth, and the attack of Haven in Sirion. Barahir, friend of Finwë, came across the Silmarili. He passed this coveted jewel to his son Beren, who later gifted it to his own son Dior, an half-elf. Upon learning of Dior's possession of the Silmaril, the sons of Fëanor set upon Dorath. Dior killed one of the brothers before dying himself, as too was his wife murdered. Doraeth is destroyed, and Durin's twin sons are left alone to die. Medros, eldest of the sons of Fëanor, is horrified by these acts that he and his brothers committed. Elwing, the young half-elf daughter of Dior, fled Durath to Sirion, a haven, with the Cimmerel. Her time was short-lived. The sons of Fëanor learned of the Cimmerel in the haven of Sirion and descended upon them. She abandoned her own twin sons, Elrond and Elros, to the sea, where the Vala Uma transformed her into a great white bird. She flew to her husband, Arundel's ship. Together they sailed to Valinor to beg the Valar to help defeat Melkor. The Valar gave the two half-elves a gift of choice, which they would pass to their descendants. In the third Kingslaying, the haven of Sirion is destroyed. Only two sons of Fëanor live, Maglor and Medros. Maglor came about the abandoned half-elf twins of Elros and Elrond and took them in, coming to love them as his own. By the end of the First Age, the two remaining brothers would find the remaining Cimmerel, but for their misdeeds the Cimmerel burned in their hands, the pain so great that Medros took his own life, and Maglor cast his into the sea, and then wandered away, never to be seen again. Meanwhile, the Valar decided to help the elves and men fight against Melkor and his armies at the behest of Elwing and Arundel. The end of the War of Wrath, which concluded the First Age, culminated in the destruction of the continent of Beleriand, save only for the land of Lindon. Arundel, who fought valiantly in the War of Wrath, was sent up into the sky in his ship Vinglot, with the Cimmeril his wife Elwing saved from the sons of Fëanor. There he still sails today, guarding the sun and the moon. Elros and Elrond eventually made it to Lindon. They are, due to their lineage, able to choose between mortal life and elf kind. Elrond chooses to be of elf kind and remain in Lindon as Gil-galad's second-in-command. Elros chooses to be mortal, though he has an elongated life, and as do his descendants. The Second Age begins with Melkor being cast into the void and Sauron in hiding. Gil-galad is the ruler of Lindon, the only land to survive the destruction of Beleriand. Círdan watches over the port city, the Grey Havens. The Valar rise a land, which came to be known as Numenor from the sea. Elros and the Dúnedain settled there. The Dúnedain, later known as the Númenóreans, are the most noble race of men who were gifted Numenor for their service during the War of Wrath. Elros became the first king of Numenor in the city Armenelos, where the white tree of Nimloth grows. There is a condition the Númenors must agree to live in Numenor. They must never sail further west to the Undying Lands, Valinor. And for over 3,000 years, this oath is upkept. After the fourth king, Tar-Elendil, the line of the kings of Numenor is split. His daughter, Silmarion, leaves to Unduni and begins the line of the lords of Unduni, the faithful. The Second Age begins with Galadriel in Lindon, married to Celebrimbor. After about 300 years, they have a daughter, Celebrane. They eventually migrate to Eregion, an elven kingdom near the dwarven mines of Khazad-dûm, also known as Moria, which was founded around 750 and ruled by the last of the House of Fëanor, Celebrimbor. After 500 years of hiding, Sauron begins to rise in Middle-earth and build Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower near Mount Doom. Around 1200, Sauron comes to Eregion disguised as Annatar, the bringer of gifts. Gil-galad and Celebrimbor distrust him, but the elves of Eregion learn from Annatar's blacksmith skills, and they begin to create the 16 lesser rings of power. In secret, Celebrimbor creates the 3 elven rings, and in the darkness of Mount Doom, Sauron creates the One Ring. Galadriel and Celebrimbor leave Eregion after Annatar's arrival to the elven city of Lothlorien. As the war of elves and Sauron begins, Celebrimbor hides the elven rings, giving 2 to Gil-galad and 1 to Galadriel. Gil-galad eventually passes 1 ring to each of his most trusted allies, Círdan and Elrond. Eregion is destroyed and Celebrimbor killed viciously. Elrond was there, sent by Gil-galad. He leaves and founds Rivendell, an elven sanctuary. Though soon Rivendell and Lindon are both besieged by Sauron and his forces. Sadly, 7 rings were already given to the dwarf lords and 9 to the mortal men. After 500 years, the 9 mortal men, ring bearers, have slowly become corrupted and have bent to Sauron's will. By 2251, the ring wraiths, the Nazgul, begin to appear in Middle-earth. Meanwhile, in Numenor, the men's greed grows there too. They are increasingly angry over the vow to never sail to Valinor and become more enraged at the elves in the Valar. After the passing of the 24th king of Numenor, his daughter Tar-Miriel is forced into a marriage with her cousin Ar-Pharazôn, who usurps power and the throne. Under Ar-Pharazôn, the Númenóreans sail to Middle-earth and imprison Sauron. Sauron further corrupts the Númenóreans and sets them against the Valar. They begin to worship Melkor as god, and go so far as to sacrifice the Andúni to him. Ar-Pharazôn sails to Valinor and sets foot there in 3319. Valinor is removed from Arda by Eru. Numenor is sunk back into the ocean and the world is made round. The surviving Númenóreans move to Middle-earth. The Black Númenóreans take refuge in Umbar, and the Andúni, or the faithful, establish Gondor and Arnor. Elendil becomes the first High King of Gondor and Arnor. In the wrecking of Numenor, Sauron is killed. Because the One Ring exists, Sauron lives on. Though he has lost his beautiful form and his ability to shapeshift and a lot of his power, he is still alive. Basically, the One Ring is a Horcrux. In 3430, the last alliance of elves and men is formed, notably between the leader of Gondor and Arnor, Elendil, and the leader of Lindon, the High King of the Noldil on Middle-earth, Gil-galad. In the 3434, the good guys take a 7-year siege of Barad-dûr. In the end, Gil-galad and Elendil are both slain by Sauron. Isildur, son of Elendil, picks up Elendil's sword Narsil and cuts the One Ring from Sauron's hand, thus stripping him of his physical body, though not fully destroying him. Elrond leads Isildur up Mount Doom, knowing the One Ring must be destroyed where its birthplace is, and the only place that its power can truly, fully, once and for all, be destroyed. But the power of the ring corrupted Isildur, who as a man was weak to its will, and Isildur turned on Elrond and left, and thus concludes the Second Age. Okay, that was a lot. Please, for the love of God, leave a comment, because I just need to know if you learned anything. Thank you for your time. I hope you understood the words. Goodbye.